out very safe because, yes, I could perish on a lot of these occasions. For sure. Absolutely.
On the series, you did the Alaska episode, and that's when you said you had that weird experience. You briefly said what you've heard, but what was it that you really heard?
Okay, so here's the story. I was in Alaska shooting the Alaskan episode of Survivorman, which some of you may have seen. I did by sea kayak. And I was not there on behalf of a Bigfoot anything. I wasn't even considering Bigfoot in my life, actually. I had experiences before that, but it wasn't even featuring in my life at all. And I was down, and you see the scenes, I'm ripping grass to make my grass dead. And every once in a while, it's like, and then I go back to it. But it's just like I heard something, right? And my head's thinking, grizzly. Well, it's grizzly. It's like, it was the kayak's over there. How fast can I get in that kayak? So I'm doing it, that's fine. That's fine. Then I heard a big snap of sorts. Now at this point, it's been a half an hour, maybe 45 minutes. I've turned the camera off. I got all my graphic bed making footage. So I had to turn the camera off and go back to finishing the grass gathering. Because when I turn the camera off, you guys see like the sped up scenes of what I do. That could be 5 hours, right? So I go back and now I'm actually gathering all the grass. Go back to it, the camera's over there. Then I heard a loud crack. So I stood up, and now you've got that, and you asked about the fear level of me, like in the Clem 2 episode that just aired in the trees. So now, you know how you just instantly have to start breathing through your mouth? Because your heart, it's like, because your heart's just going. And it's like, okay. Now I'm really thinking grizzly bear, full on. Okay, this is like aggressive. That's an aggressive sound, whatever it was. But I'm not moving. Then, as I sat there, or stood there, sorry, I heard like that, only 25 times louder than that, than any human can do. And then I heard it 4 more times for a total of 5 times, super loud. It would echo off these walls. And I would say the distance is roughly that wall, maybe a little farther, maybe the grass. And so I was frozen. And this took about maybe a minute, 5 different times. I'm hearing this. So now, bears don't make that. I've heard bears bark and grunt. But this 5 times in a row and up the tree a bit. And just like that, I mean, none of this had the earmarkings of bear activity. You know, I've been around bears all my life. None of this. To me, I've had them walk charge at me. I've heard them grunt, snort, and bark. Nothing like this. So I stood and frozen, you know, breathing through my mouth, and my heart's pumping, and I'm looking at the camera, and I'm thinking if I could just press record, which means turning it back on. And if any of you have ever turned on a video camera, switch. This is in the days of tape. And no, not yet. Record. Right? This is one of the reasons why you don't catch stuff when it happens. It happens and it's gone. Right? But anyway, I hadn't even got to the camera. It's 20 feet from me. So finally, after the 5th time, now I'm getting ticked. I'm like, come on. Like, I'm thinking, like, come on. You're giving me deep concern. So I went like that, and I went to go and grab my camera. Before I could even get to the camera with that fast movement, it bolted from the bush that way off into the forest, and it sounded like a freight train going through the forest, like. Now I've heard moose make a big noise going through the forest. I've heard bear running through the bush. This sounded like a freight train. Like trees were being pushed aside and snapped as it went along. And not small trees, not big trees, but trees. And And at that point on, now here's the rest of the epilogue of the story is, you know what I thought? I thought, Bigfoot. Anyway, because what else was I to think? I wasn't doing Bigfoot documenting, and the next thought was, I can't tell anybody about this. Because the minute I bring this into the edit of the story, nobody's going to pay attention to my nice shelter. My glass bed that I just made. So I never told a soul. I didn't put it in the film. It just was a personal experience, and I let it be. And then everybody thinks it was the Joe Rogan podcast when I told the story. That probably got the most attention, but actually, the first time it came out, which is why Joe asked me, was on the Opie and Anthony show on, I think, Sirius Satellite. And this was years later. And one of them just goes, "Hey man, have you ever seen a Bigfoot out there? He's just being a radio jock." And I was in it, and I always tell the truth. And I've never been asked that question. And I was like, uh-oh. And I went, actually. And then told the story I just told you, and from there, it went on, you know. But, as I said, I've never seen one. That was one experience. I've had a number of experiences now. That was one experience, and that's what happened. Yes, ma'am?
When you heard that running,
Oh, we're still on Bigfoot, are we? Okay. When I heard the running,
did you go look and see what was damage had been done?
I was going to, but between me and there, it was all swampy muck swamp. And I'm still in survival mode. So I don't want to get my boots wet. I want a dry night. And anyway, it's Bigfoot. What am I going to do about that? Nothing. So it's like, I gotta finish building this shelter and film myself surviving in Alaska. I literally put it out of my head. And isn't that what happens a lot for anybody who's had an experience? It's crazy how often you'll talk to someone who has an encounter of sorts and then say, well, what'd you do about it? Nothing. What was I going to do about it? Told my sister. That's about it. Told the guys at work. They laughed. Never told anybody else. And you put it back there. I've had 3 or 4 experiences before I started filming this series. I just forgot about it. I had one with my first wife. No big deal. She'll remember it, but we never talked about it. Had one on my own that I'd forgotten about. One of my first experience was one of those hair-raising, feminine-sounding, horrifying screams. I had that happen. I forgot all about it. So it's interesting you take it, and because you know it's a difficult, controversial thing, but yet you know you experienced it, and you take it, you put it back there, you put it on the shelf.
Your opinion, what do you think
I had to preface it with my opinion. You said, what do I think it is? I would have copped out on the answer. I try not to have an opinion. There's my cop out. And Jeff Malbram and John Bitter and Hagen and I were discussing this, and this is where I differ from some people. I just think that, and I do this a lot on the show, if it exists, I think that it most definitely has to have an acquired I'm looking for not instinctual, but developed intelligence level that is more than we're willing to give it, because you can't be responsible for all of these anecdotal references and be stupid. Which is not to say, thank you, John, it's not to say that apes are stupid. Any primatologist will argue for the intelligence level of a simple ape. But I'm suggesting that this subject matter, that if it exists, it's got to have a level of intelligence that most of us are not willing to even entertain. And as I said, I differ even from my associates that even I would like to push the envelope a little farther than they do, because I still think for it to be able to do certain things, it has to have an intelligence level that goes beyond simple abstract thinking. So, I didn't answer your question, but that's my comment.